So, man, really glad we connected because I think there's so much that you've been talking about for years now that just from your personal story of transformation, your personal journey, and also just the things that you're helping people with yourself.
Yep.
Not just yourself, but also what you're overflowing and helping people with. I think there's so much to talk about here in terms of how men heal, and
Mm.
what better place than to talk about your own journey, as what better starting point. So just I'm curious, maybe share a little bit about, I'll share myself, but I'm curious to share a little bit about who you are, where you are, your story, your journey, maybe start last 10 years and how your healing journey even started.
Absolutely, man. And to start, obviously, it's good to connect with people like yourself because we're both in the same world. We're trying to better ourselves and better other people at the same time. And it's really fun to talk to somebody like yourself because I think we challenge each other, right? Because it's like we're used to the client coach relationship, but when you get two coaches, it's like, okay, where are we gonna sharpen each other? And so, but yeah, my story's to simplify it as simple as possible. It's growing up not really having any direction, and then really seeking out mentors, seeking out higher mindset things. I actually lost a sibling to a mental health, issue, took her own life, those type of things. So for me, it was like this stuff is important. Like I know this stuff. I've seen it firsthand, and for my coaching journey, it's kind of like helping men to discover and women to discover this part of themselves to really find that healing within them and know that they can transform their mind. We focus so much on external transformations because we can see them, people going from broke to rich. It's like, okay, obviously this guy used to drive a Honda, now he drives a Lambo. Like, that's cool. So our minds like understand that. Or this guy was super fat, now he's ripped, so our minds can see that. But the mental transformations are intangible, and yet they're the most important. And so it's kind of open up the door to that mindset. Like, what brought you into this world, TJ?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for you, sharing about loss, like that's I think the common denominator for anybody who doesn't have healing as a part of their vocabulary. Me personally, it's interesting. You can kind of, and I don't know if you resonate with this, but you can kind of sell yourself on a story that isn't reality,
Mm,
just as a way to cope through difficult things that happen in life. And I
right.
spent I spent a lot of my life doing that, like selling myself on a story that wasn't necessarily the whole story, just
Mm,
so I could cope through difficult things. And the first experience of loss that really prompted like the idea that, that the suffering was indeed a thing that happens, was when I was 16. I lost a friend in a car accident.
mm,
And so that was a pretty difficult circumstance for me because I remember, just as a like a real practical for people, because I think everybody has a memory moment of loss. And for me, it was a conflict because I walked outside and I saw how bright and sunny it was.
mhm,
And I thought to myself, I had just found out the news, and I thought to myself, like, how could it be such a nice day and I feel so terrible inside as a 16-year-old?
mhm, mhm,
And that conflict was really, and my search and walk with God at that point was more just like me trying to get to Him. It was very religious and ritualistic in the sense that how a lot of people live is it was, oh, I say my prayer in order to check the box, and that was kind of my experience with God. But from that point forward, I think that loss prompted a real shift in maybe how I was approaching my faith and my walk with God,
mm,
because I started asking those bigger questions like, is there more? What happens after? And those kinds of things. And so for me, that was the first experience of loss that really prompted the idea that suffering was real. And then the second was in my 20s, and this was when my dad got sick. I actually think he was misdiagnosed. I don't have the firm details of all that happened because there wasn't honestly a lot shared after, but he got misdiagnosed. They did surgery,
mhm.
and I was overseas when it happened. I remember while I was overseas, my dad sending me an email, and I was like, what the heck is this email? It was an email about like, enjoy your life basically. Like not
Wow.
like I'll see you never, but it was like these are
Yeah,
the
yeah.
things I want to write to you because I'm in such a deep place of like this is real, my life might be over kind of thing.
Wow.
And so when you're 20, 21 years old and you're overseas and you're spending time abroad, and then you get this email, and you're like, do I need to fly home right now?
Yeah.
And so all of that, that's another experience that almost of near loss. And then a different expression of loss was when and I'm just trying to paint the picture for people because you need to understand what loss looks like in your life. And I had a loss of value in success and accomplishment when I was working on Wall Street, and I realized
Mhm.
a promotion and more money was actually not of real value to me, and that was loss.
Mhm.
And I was lost in life. I lost my identity. I didn't know who I was, and so all of these things led me to the wilderness season, which then I ended up actually seeing my dad die and
Mhm.
having a health awakening as a result. And I recognized it wasn't until I saw my dad die, truthfully, out of all those experiences I just mentioned, it wasn't until I saw my dad die with my own eyes
Yeah.
that I realized that there was a real need for me to heal from something.
Mhm.
And, it's funny because I was adopted at birth. So, of
Oh,
course, there was a need for me to heal from something, but I had
right.
painted a picture and sold myself on a story for so long that things are cool and I didn't end up on the street. So, why would
Yes.
I need to have any help going through anything? Right. Because I talked with people who ended up on the street who went through the foster care system. Right.
Right.
And so I'm like, I ended up with the good side of the story.
Yeah.
Right. But
Right.
then I ended up years in counseling going, "Whoa, I gotta unravel some things. I gotta
Right.
actually get right." Good the Lord started working in my life to heal me from the inside out, and you know
Mhm.
what ended up happening is that journey of health, which starts with 4 letters, heal, that journey of health started changing me as a man and allowed me to end patterns in relationships that were so destructive that
Mm.
allowed me to then get married, in terms
Wow.
of, like, why men need to heal.
Yeah.
There it is. There's one example, like,
Right.
because we're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, yeah.
continue destructive patterns, you know?
Wow. And
So
a ton of things I picked up on that. And the thing that, really stands out is, well, two things. Number one is when you have some tragedy like that, it kind of wakes us up, right? It's kind of like, oh crap, I am going through life. Part of life is death. And there's so much of our culture that just kind of puts that aside, right? Like we want to just pretend like, oh, we're going to live forever and, and Netflix and, drink, like it's like just this whole version of life that doesn't have to deal with these things. And then you get the other side of it, like, oh no, this is real. Like the people I love the most in my life or had the biggest impact are there's going to be a time when they're not here anymore, and being able to really process that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's I find like there's people who chase things in life and then they don't get them and they're sad, right? And then there's people who chase things in life, they get them and they realize that didn't fulfill them and they're even more sad. And so it sounds like you reached that pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy where you're like, crap, okay, I'm making money. I'm doing all the things that quote unquote should make me happy, and I'm not there yet. And some people, they unravel from that state, but you were like, hey, I'm going to seek for more, which I think that is, when people hit that wall in their life, sometimes they think there's something wrong with them. They're like, I should be happy at this state. And it reminds me of a quote I heard. It was like back in the 50s where women were really struggling in a mass amount of having mental issues. And they're like, they would go to the psychologist and be like, I have a vacuum cleaner. I have a husband who doesn't beat me. I have, I have a house. Why am I so sad? And it's like, well, you don't have a purpose. Like all the things that we know, psychologically people need in their life. And we've done that in this society. Like, oh, you got the nice car, you got all the money coming in. And then people are like, what's wrong with me? Well, there's nothing wrong with you. It's called being human. You're having an existential crisis. Some people go down at that and they, that's when the addictions come in, the other things. Some people seek for more. And it sounds like you took the wise journey of saying, let's go within, let's find out what's really the process. So that's something that really stands out from that story, that you actually
Oh.
took the higher road there.
Well, and what's interesting is you can't even like you look back on your life and you go, "Wow, where can I even take credit for things?" And I
Right.
look at certain aspects of my life, like that choice fork in the road moment. You reach the crossroads, right? And it sounds like when you lost a sibling, I'm sure there were multiple crossroads you had to encounter in your life. Like, what do I do from here? Because like
Yeah, yeah.
that's so significant. And like when you reach crossroads in your life and you have to make that choice, like, am I going to be better or bitter? Am I going to grow or am I
Yeah.
going to shrink back? And I look at that and I look at what God did in my life and even just the journey that he brought me through the Holy Spirit actually encountering me. And I go,
Mhm.
wow, I can't even take credit for that. Like literally the
Sure.
only thing I could look back and go, sure, I made a choice, but there were many moments when it was like, "God, I don't even know what to do. I can't do. A Tuesday afternoon, I'm by myself in an apartment in New York. I'm trying to figure out the entrepreneur journey. Forget that's its own journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starting
Yeah.
coaching, figuring that out. And I'm like grieving from losing my dad and trying to figure out how to heal from that in a long distance relationship that's just running into the same pattern and cycle I'd been in for years in my any relationship with a woman, and I'm like, I can't let this happen again. And my health was kind of just, I was trying to pick up the pieces from being burned out from lifestyle choices for you. And there I'm going, what can I do there? Like I actually needed God to intervene, and he
Right.
did through specific ways, in terms of like how you heal. Here's a practical way. I was journaling one day because I knew that that was a practice that was helpful for me, and it actually helped me bring thoughts out on paper so
Mhm.
that I could see. A lot of times people think, "Oh, well, I hear myself talk," but that's not necessarily the number
Yeah.
one way. Like seeing thoughts on a page, it really does help you build discernment in truth from lies, especially if you're reading scripture and you understand what truth actually is. And the Lord can show you through writing down thoughts, even if it's not true. You can see, okay, I've been believing a lie, or that doesn't look right. So I was
Yeah.
writing down some thoughts in a journal one morning because I didn't know what else to do. And I just remember going, dude, I'm stuck. Like, I'm so
Mhm.
stuck in my stuff. Like, there's no way. I mean, of course, God can heal, and I've seen him heal physically. Like, bro, I've seen
Yeah.
him heal people physically. But I was like, I need somebody else. Like, I
Yeah.
need somebody who's had some experience talking with people through this stuff. I don't even know where to begin. And the first idea was like, I need to go to counseling. But that was such, I don't know if your experience with counseling was like this, but growing up, counseling was like a negative thing for me
Right.
because
Right.
it meant you were crazy.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And, that's why probably healing wasn't even in my vocabulary, because it's not
Right.
that counseling equals healing, but it's a step in the journey of healing.
Sure.
And so, yeah, for me, that was a big deal that I even thought counseling. I believe that was a God thought.
Yeah.
And I believe
Yeah.
he led me to a person who I ended up seeing for 3 years, like, he's
Awesome.
just an amazing guy,
Yeah.
man of God. And, I don't know, for you, when you're thinking about your journey in healing and, like, how you even first of all, when did it occur to you, like, you even needed to do that,
Right.
And then, like, how did you even start?
No, for sure. And I think for when we're telling our story, it's almost easier to just have a simple timeline, but of course our stories are so convoluted and ups and downs and stuff. And all of that is super vulnerable and I can relate to a ton of it. And I think the idea for me, a lot of people think it was, the tragedy of my sister taking her life. That was the thing for me. It's so funny because the hardest things I've ever been through in my life is breakups, which it's like and it's like, yeah, death of a family member obviously is terrible. I mean, it's hard to compare, but there's something so ruthless about getting your heart broke when you're 13 years old. It's like and I think honestly that propelled me in a huge way to think, okay, I am suffering. And the paradox between work and grace, right? That's always the biggest Christian paradox. Like, is it our works? Is it faith? Is it grace? And I almost think some of the work we have to do is in undoing, right? So that we can remove the blocks to grace awareness in our life. And so I remember there was a time when I was really going through it and just kind of tossing and turning, couldn't sleep. I had gone through this breakup, somebody broke my heart, that type of situation. And I remember the Lord telling me at that moment, saying, write down everything that's coming from me and write down everything that's coming from the enemy. And I started writing down my thoughts. And I could tell the thoughts that were coming for God were about the future. It was about hope. It was about my identity in God. It was about grace. It was about forgiveness. And the thoughts that were coming from the enemy was like, guilt, resentment, shoulda, woulda, couldas. How many times do we do that? And which obviously there is some good to look at our thoughts and say, yeah, I can make a better decision or whatever. But when we're just beating ourselves up incessantly, that is not from God. And so when I started doing that, that's when I'm like, oh, our minds actually transform our lives, and getting discernment on that, which of course that's my whole coaching, your whole coaching. It's literally going into people's heads and saying, this thought is not aligned with truth. Let's get rid of that because it's obviously not helping you.
So true, man. It's so this like the game that is played. It's not even a game, it's a war that
Hmm.
goes on in the mind.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, and that's truthfully, that's one of the things when I hear you talk, and I'll be like, man, that's so spot on. I'll be like, just like this is exactly people need to hear this because I'll see some of your content. I'm like, dude, this guy is nailing it because because you understand the war in the mind in
Right.
the way that people don't have language for. And so when you're thinking about that, I'm just curious, like how old were you when the Lord started showing you how to even split the voices? And I mean, in a healthy way, we're not talking about other voices, but like his voice
Yeah.
from the voice of the enemy. How old were you? Do you remember?
I would say about, 16, 17, 18 is when
Wow.
it really started hitting, which of course correlates with some of the hardest suffering I've been through, as far as mental suffering and stuff. So, but the funny thing too is as I talk to people now, there's almost this illusion that, okay, now you don't you don't have problems or you don't have issues. And I will say in a big way, I suffer a lot less in life, and pain is inevitable, but suffering, the way we interpret the pain is definitely up to our interpretation of life, our interpretation of reality. And so my interpretation has gotten such that my suffering is way, way lower than it was, even when I go through tragedies. And so when I actually went through the tragedy of my sister, I had done so much of my spiritual walk. It wasn't as horrific as you would expect. And I think that was eye opening to me because I would look around at people who were complete disasters after it. And it was like I turned into this person that was kind of helping people and walking them through it when they felt like they should be helping me in the sense. And that's when the light bulb moment went on where it was like, wow, like these things that the Lord has been showing me throughout these years is really beneficial. And you don't really see it until something like that happens in life. Like the medic doesn't know that he's a medic until there's a war breaks out and everybody's hurt, and then all of a sudden you get your skills, and so that was kind of the moment to me that, so, oh wow, I got something here, like where I can actually. And of course it's not me, it's coming through, which is why you resonate with it, right? We're both hearing the higher voice of God. And that's why I think we can know, like when somebody says something spot on, we're like, and same with you. I remember I clicked on your thing and I liked it. And I was like, oh, this dude knows what's up. And I don't even remember what you said, but truth, when you hear it, you're like, okay, this guy's got it. This guy's on the same, kind of wavelength.
Hmm.
And we frame it in different ways. We use different words, but when you really resonate with that, I think you can kind of see it in the other person. So I
Oh,
appreciate that as well
totally.
with you.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm when you're talking about healing, I'm thinking through so many different things. I'd have so many questions. This should be like a 3-hour conversation, honestly, because people need to hear it.
Yeah.
But to the person who is so I think there's the people who are like, "Oh, no, it's good. We're good." Like, I grew up, I had a good family, life was cool, I had things provided for me, my parents are great, I have privilege in life and all these other things, and they're, like, thinking, "Oh, I don't really have suffering, I don't really have a problem."
Yeah.
To those people, I can't even really have a conversation with you, frankly, because you're
Right.
just, like, you're not in the zone of recognizing suffering exists in life
Sure.
regardless of your situation. In other words, you got blinders on and you don't understand depravity of man yet.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
don't wish that upon you from the sense of suffering, but I do wish for you that you understand the deep meaning and the value of suffering. And what's interesting is the word passion, actually the root word of passion is suffering.
Oh,
And
really?
so yeah, so when people think about the idea of being passionate about something, they don't always connect it with the idea of suffering.
Yeah.
But in the areas that you have experienced suffering and overcome, that is where people have a lot of passion, and for you, for example,
Interesting.
like the growth and healing that you've
Yeah.
experienced and the health that you've had transformation in, those things, I'm not surprised that you love coaching people in those areas for deep transformation.
Right.
because there's real, like you said, there's real suffering, and you've
Mhm.
learned maybe, I wouldn't call it like how to suffer well, maybe you long suffer, like you learn the value and character trait and fruit of the spirit of long suffering
Right.
through a lot of different things that you've maybe experienced and worked on in your life. I'm curious how you see, because health is such a foundation. When my dad died,
Mhm.
it became like honestly a rude awakening and a good awakening for me health wise.
Yeah.
Because I was not, I grew up an athlete, and I thought I knew what being healthy was, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I just beat the heck up out of my body in terms of
Yeah.
like even just not caring for it. But your health journey, where do you see health on the spectrum, or even as a tool for healing?
Oh, 100%. And I would say for me, it's a holistic approach, right? Like it's almost like when people talk about mental health, they think it's like a category, right? Like, and obviously you understand it's not, because like everything we experience in life, we filter through our mind. Like literally everything. This phone conversation, my body, what is the use of my body? What is the point of my body? What is the purpose of my body? All these things are mental states for us, right? And we're seeing the world through the filter of our minds. And so when we talk about mental health, it's gonna really impact every other aspect of us. And I know for me, there was a point when I was similar to you. I just kind of lived my life, didn't take I junk food, terrible food, whatever. And I never really saw anything wrong with it for a long time. I was just like, who cares? And that was almost coming from a spiritual perspective in my mind because I'm a soul. Who cares about the body? Like leave it. And I remember there was one night I couldn't sleep and I was sitting there thinking about it, which for some reason that's usually when my biggest realizations come when the world is quiet and if anybody's had those long nights without sleep, that's when you hear some stuff. And it was a moment where I was like, man, I've been given this gift of this body and I'm just like trashing it. And it was like this kind of sense of like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. And I remember that next day I woke up, ate like super healthy, and then it was just kind of that journey ever since. So if we're not eating correctly, our mind is not going to be functioning correctly. It's very difficult to be in a positive mind state when you're unhealthy physically, right? Like we know that if you've ever been sick, it's very hard to think positive when you're dealing with a flu or something like that. Like thinking positive is the last thing on your mind. But yeah, I just think it's a holistic approach. And I know with my sister's passing, when she would be so she struggled with mental health her whole life and bipolar and in and out of hospitals, different things like that. And one of the things is when she would be doing well mentally, she was working out every day and doing those type of things and really taking care of herself. And so I know for me, it's like, uh, I know that it's so important for me to take care of myself because, and it seems selfish. That's something sometimes people got to get over is this whole idea of like, oh, if I take care of myself, I'm just being selfish. But my sister's a perfect example of when she didn't take care of herself, she was no longer valuable to the rest of the world, right? She's literally not here anymore. So so I know if I'm being selfish by going to the gym, by going to the sauna, by eating healthy, by all these things and taking quality time out for myself, that this selfishness is actually going to make me more of service to others. And the idea of like, is love more important or is discipline more important? Well, I'd argue that like the idea is if you're not disciplined, you can't truly love. Like there are very loving people who are homeless right now, who are messed up, who are on drugs. But if I'm in trouble, am I going to go to that guy for anything? No, because he has nothing to offer me. Where if I'm very disciplined in my health, my finances, my life, I'm going to be of value to people and I'm going to be able to love them more. I'm going to be able to help them more if I'm in better shape, if I'm taking care of myself more. So it really comes down to, we help ourselves and then helping others, which I think that mindset and bring it back to the topic at hand is like, that's the idea I try to get into men's minds is you becoming the best version of you is, even though it may on paper look egoish and whatever, it's actually you becoming a beacon for everybody else. And it sounds like you kind of had that awakening with your father and stuff like that. What about you? Where's that played in your life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree on a lot of what you were saying, because I just really resonate with the practical, like I see this in my life, I treat my wife better.
Yeah.
Just frankly, like I treat her better. I treat myself better. Normally when I'm not treating somebody well, it's because I'm not treating myself well.
God,
And
that's a banger right there.
it's like
Yes.
not that complicated, but it's
Wow.
one of those things that is really easy to overlook. And the idea of men today being able to look at themselves in the mirror and go, dang, I need to like do some healing here. Well,
Yeah.
take a look, just frankly, like take a look at how you're treating people. And you can see, like, is there opportunity for you to go through some healing, wholeness yourself? And I can point out for sure, I still have areas of my life that need to be healed, because guess what happens is when you grow, change, you have twins and become new parents, yeah, you have real need for
Oh
healing
yeah.
in your
Oh yeah.
marriage because you guys don't have any sleep. My wife and I just cracking up about it the other day. It's like how much of our conflict that we love each other so much, and we've like had such an amazing marriage, and our relationship went through a lot of fires even up to marriage. So there was so much of a foundation there. But like we look at each other like how much of our conflict is due to like poor sleep, like
Oh,
literally no
100%.
sleep with
Yeah, yeah,
twins.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how much is that? And so you kind of have to have a balance in your mindset of, okay, some things practically are just like, all right, yeah, sure, maybe I need healing, or maybe I just need to go to bed, but
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
And
that sleep is meant to help heal and recover,
so true.
so
So true.
it's
And it's funny
practical.
that and you bring up a couple things. Like number one, like I literally was pissed off at my wife last night, and it's because I didn't go to the gym. Like, and I know for sure that was it. And then the second thing is, yeah, like that's the thing that takes the pressure off me as being a coach, is I know I'm still growing, I'm still changing. And a lot of the things that's why I like the coaching roles. We can relate our own personal walks into this. And by me sharing these things, it's not like I'm coming from a place of like, oh, I've got it all figured out, everything's perfect. Like these are things that we're both walking through. I mean, God, I talked about the dark night of the soul, two twins, 9 months. I mean, dude, you're on it right now.
Well, and it's funny too is like you talk about the idea of what are you aiming for? And I
Mhm.
think even with healing, it's a good conversation, and in the coaching world especially. But like for me, pinned on my right now on my Instagram, pinned is a story about how I like self-sabotage something from a whole situation about fear of children and core wound of adoption and lying to my wife about money and then 200 grand in debt and how God redeemed it. And like that, bro, that is literally like example A, not perfect. I
Yeah,
will pin it for you to see.
I
Like
love it. I love it.
this
Yep.
is not for anybody to try and get the wrong idea. I'm not proud of things I've done. I'm actually proud of the person I'm becoming.
Right.
And
I love that. Totally.
and so like praise God for the ways he's redeemed my life,
Yep.
and praise God for the ways that he continues to help me become the person he's made me to be and to make that choice. The reality is we have brokenness that we have to accept. I don't agree with brokenness. I don't agree like, oh, I am a broken person and that's how I'll live. No, I'm not a broken person. I'm actually a new creation. That's what
Right.
I agree with. But I accept that brokenness exists within
Right.
me. I
Right.
accept that, and I accept it in a way where I can say that allows me to be the person who says, I actually need help. I
Yeah.
actually have depravity in my life because I'm not perfect, and I need help, and I need to do what? Well, the goal is to choose growth. And
Yeah.
that is ultimately where I come back to myself for my mindset, that
Mhm.
I think a lot of people struggle with, especially when you start on the healing journey. You think it's like wholeness is the goal, like complete wholeness. And while that is absolutely possible, I believe it's even possible on this side, like I believe
Yep.
heaven can meet earth, and I believe that's possible in that moment. But ultimately, for eternity, I believe wholeness is possible. I just think
Sure.
right now, the expectation is not I'm going to be invincible, because
Right.
I'm whole and I'm healed and everything's cool. It's like, guess what happens? We live in a broken world. You about to get knife cut there in a second. I'm not talking literally, but
Exactly.
somebody's gonna
Oh
throw
yeah.
a word at you, and you're gonna be
100%.
like, "Whoa, I
Yep.
need to heal from that." You know?
So true, man. And the thing that brings up, and I think which has been a big part of your healing and my healing as well is the idea of, people talk a lot about people being unself-aware in this world. And they almost look at it like, oh, this guy's so unself-aware, he doesn't know his own issues. And that's usually, we'll use the term narcissist for that, right? Or whatever, right? Which of course, these things have been around for thousands of years. We just now label it whatever, right? Like anxiety's been with us since the time of man, depression's been with us. Like these things are not new things. These are the existential crisis of being a human being and being mortal and having, and having this life that we live. But one of the things is people think that people who are unself-aware are just selfish. And I think usually people who are unself-aware are lacking compassion to look within. Because looking at your own stuff, your own darkness, is not an easy thing to do. And especially if you have zero compassion for yourself, you have zero grace for yourself, if you're able to, and that's why I think having some philosophy of forgiveness, understanding of, the bigger picture and understanding we are imperfect, that helps men look within. Because like you said, if you can't look within, if you can't acknowledge the problem, you're not going to be able to grow through it. But a lot of us will avoid looking at the problem because we hold so much resentment within. And a lot of the work I do, I spend time with inmates and talking with, people who have done pretty horrific things in their life and with their life. And you think you're going to run into sociopaths when you do this type of work. What I have seen is I run into the most guilt-ridden individuals who are harboring so much self-guilt that they can't even look within. So what do? They project outwards. They hurt other people. They screw up their life. They self-sabotage their life. They do all these destructive things because they're so scared to look within. And as soon as you bring that message of grace, forgiveness, they start bawling, they start crying, but then they start changing. So the precursor to self-awareness and changing is having some compassion on yourself. And I think men are lacking that in a huge way because we're taught to be perfect, we're taught to be great and blah blah blah, never have any problems. But the first step in that is just that awareness and being able to have compassion to have that awareness ultimately.
Yeah. And like you nailed it. I was going to ask the question, what's a broken mindset to you? And I think you just nailed exactly what the brokenness of our mindset can be, which is, that I don't deserve compassion. And there might
Mm,
be, there might be a reality to that based on action. But so like in biblical truth, so, it's funny because truth comes in layers. And I once heard it said this way, and it made so much sense to me. But people often live in the first layer of truth, of biblical truth, that you reap what you sow, right?
right,
That's where
right.
people live. You get what you deserve. You reap what you sow. And that's honestly in self-help, self-development, personal growth, personal development. That's what people preach, and that's the message.
Sure.
But here's the deeper truth is you get what you don't deserve. And that's Jesus dying on the cross for you, even though you didn't deserve it. Because while you were still
Mm,
a sinner, Jesus died for you to
right,
give you what? Forgiveness that you didn't earn, that you
right,
can earn, that you only get to receive.
right.
And so it's like, but both exist in truth, like both
Sure.
realities exist. You reap what you sow. Yes, there is a real consequence for action. And guess what? We also get what we don't deserve. And that's the greatest gift we could ever have.
I love that.
Something that we didn't deserve that God has given us freely to say yes to and receive. And when I think about a broken mindset, I think about somebody who doesn't have that revelation yet, that you actually, although you get what you deserve, although you can put yourself in this, like, hold yourself in condemnation. And people, by the way, do this quietly, right? They
Mhm.
hold themselves, they like condemn themselves. It's like, oh, if I
Yeah.
condemn myself for long enough and make myself feel bad for long enough, then I'm paying the price for whatever I've done. It doesn't matter whether it's
Yeah.
mistreating my wife,
Yep.
poor management of finances, not following through on something at work or my health, or something more severe that ended up, with me in jail. Like
Yeah.
that, people want to hold it against themselves as though it does something.
Absolutely.
It doesn't do a thing
Yep.
except keep
Yep.
you feeling like trash.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up such a solid point here is the paradox between the two layers of thinking. Because on the material realm, you're absolutely right. We reap what we sow. But on the spiritual realm, it's a completely different existence. And it's almost like the idea of achieving for happiness or happily achieving. And they look very similar to the external circumstances because some people are achieving because they think they're going to be happy after they achieve. Some people are achieving because they're happy within and they want to expand and they want to grow and they want to, so, and the way, just because something's a paradox doesn't mean they can't coexist, and I think that's what you're doing a good job presenting. And the idea of, you will never be more loved by God than you are right now. Like, nothing either one of us can do. We could help, feed a million kids. We could save the world. God still loves you the same, right? But in the sense now, like, knowing that, you can, through that outflow of love, you end up actually helping more people, because you're coming from a place of abundance. It's almost like the billionaire giving away money, once he realizes is a billionaire, is an easier thing to do than the person who thinks, oh, I've only got $10, type of thing. And essentially, on the spiritual realm, we are billionaires. We are receiving endless grace, endless love from our creator of all things. Like, that is a powerful position to be, to end up loving more people from that.
Yeah, totally. I'm like tracking 100%. I just for the sake of time, is there anything
Yeah.
that you'd say, in terms of, okay, real men do heal.
Yeah.
I really believe there's a lot of men out there who want to step, one step in that journey. What would you say to a guy who's like, dude, I don't even know what I need, but I'm like recognizing I need that, whatever that is. What would you say to that person's first practical expression to get started?
Great question. Because of course I like to work in philosophical intangibles that are, but it's like, put some rubber to the road here.
Yeah.
And I would say, just do something for yourself, whether that is one step closer, and say, okay, you may have 100 things wrong in your life right now. You may be addict, you may be overweight, you may have terrible relationships, but can you go for a walk today and say a 2-minute prayer on that walk? Or can you listen to 5 minutes of a self-help podcast instead of 5 hours of Netflix? Can you do, one little step? And then of course that starts compounding and we start feeling better. And then, but if you just look at your life and say, okay, I need to fix my relationship, I need to fix my finances, I need to get ripped, I need to, you're never going to touch it. So just taking one small step in the right direction builds momentum. What about you?
Oh, nailed it. I mean, I just started that broadcast channel on my Instagram called the Mile a Day Mindset. You just literally articulated what it is, which is
Mhm.
I've been running my mile a day now for 172 days.
Wow.
And bro, like just that I did it for myself. I wasn't doing it so I could like
Yeah.
talk about it. But now I'm like, this is a part of my life, and I've realized the value over time of this mindset. Not even so running a mile a day, whatever. That was just me 4 months into being a new parent, recognize I'm not getting any sleep. My schedule's out of whack. I'm like just not being a nice person, and I need to do something that allows me some time and space that is manageable, repeatable, consistent, and can help me just kind of get back to grounding in a very
I love
practical
that.
way.
Super good. Super
So
good
that was
lesson.
me, mile a day, but the mindset. You mentioned earlier how like you suffer like not as significant when you suffer now because of the capacity that's grown within you. And that is for sure. When I'm coaching and working with people, I talk about growing your window of tolerance, growing your capacity through working on your health and how
Mhm.
that influences your mindset. But for me, one of the ways that I've seen this expression of a stronger mindset is through this mentality that what you just said, which is just the small but consistent, repeatable things that I can be doing one
Yeah.
step at a time. That over the course of the last decade of my life has literally changed everything.
I love that.
So
Love
I
that.
would 100% agree. That is
Yeah.
the best thing you can do.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's more to be had in this conversation. So maybe there'll be a
Oh, I
part
know.
two.
We could go for hours, I know. And I know you got a call coming up, but thanks, man. I appreciate your time, and we'll keep doing these. I think we got a lot to touch on, so
Well, I'm super glad. Yeah, I'm super glad you joined.
absolutely.
Thank you for making time to do this. I think some people are going to have a lot of takeaways from it.
Cool. Yeah, you as well, brother. Appreciate you, man. All right.